When first starting out, new bookbinders face a few hurdles. One of them is around access to equipment, and one of the first pieces of equipment that they need is a guillotine to trim text blocks. Every time I teach an introduction to bookbinding course, I get asked, can you trim a text block with a knife? I've tried this in the past and it's always been a complete disaster, but I've decided to revisit it. So here I am trimming the text block with my favourite knife, and it's a complete disaster. But I noticed the problem was that the 9mm blade was flexing an awful lot. So maybe the solution's a different knife. Next knife that I thought of was the good old Stanley 99E. I figured the blade on that's not going to flex. So I managed to cut right through the text block with a fairly vertical cut. But the edge is pretty rough. That result's not good enough for me. But I did notice that I think the problem was I was putting too much pressure on the knife. So I thought I'm going to give it another go with lighter cuts, and I'm also going to change the blade to a fresh blade. Straight away, the lighter cuts feel like it's going better. So lots of light cuts seems to be an improvement. And I'm putting a bit more pressure on the ruler as well to compress the text block. So I'm pretty happy with that result. The head's a bit rough. I thought about that. I thought maybe I could live with it. Maybe not, and I thought maybe I'll give it a bit of a sand. That's pretty common when you're preparing an edge for an edge finish. The sanding paper looks really bad, but I've been sanding a bit of leather with it. That's not going to really hurt the edge. With a little bit of sanding, I think if I was just starting out in bookbinding and trying to decide whether it's a hobby I was going to keep doing, then I'd be pretty happy with that result. But can I do better? Decided the 99E blade wasn't sharp enough. So I decided to try an 18mm blade. I hoped that would be thick enough that it wouldn't flex. And straight away, it felt like it was going a lot better. So I'm pretty happy with that result. That's not as good as my guillotine, certainly not as good as a plough, but it's a good enough job to keep going. So now to do the head and the tail. So I'm going to use a set square to make sure that I get the cuts perpendicular. And straight away I noticed a problem. The swell at the tail meant that I couldn't compress the text block properly. You can see it in this from this angle. You can see the spine is too thick. Well, this is a common problem when you're using a plough, and the solution is to round the book, and that gets rid of the swell. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. I'm going to round the book. Now with the book rounded, the swell's not an issue at the spine. So this first attempt's going pretty good. I'm reasonably happy with this. It's a bit wonky at the spine. That wonky patch was bothering me a bit, so I decided to see if I could trim it up a bit. And then I thought maybe I'd take a bit of sandpaper to it as well and see if I could fix it that way. Yep, I'm happy with that result, so let's do the tail now. Same thing, use the set square to make sure that it's a right angle. That starts off really well, and then it goes pear-shaped really quickly. Not sure what I did differently, but it just didn't work. Yeah, not happy with that result at all. Alright, we'll give it another go. I also noticed that this was making big gouges in my cutting mat, so I decided to put a bit of board underneath it. And it starts off pretty good, so that's a good sign. So I'm happy with that result. So I think the answer is that you can trim up a text block with a knife and a ruler, and the trick is to use a very sharp knife that doesn't flex, and before doing the head and the tail to round the text block.